See what they can't see, know what they don't know. Every hidden path, every open door. This is Recon at Horizon 3.
Hello. Welcome to our podcast. I'm Chris Corbett, VP of Engineering at Horizon 3 AI, and I have with me today Jimmy, one of our fantastic attack engineers. And Jimmy, could you do a brief intro?
Sure. I'm Jimmy. Like Chris said, I'm one of the attack engineers here. I focus on attack content with the special focus geared towards rapid response. So my day to day varies based on the latest breaking, most critical vulnerabilities. And we attempt to either reverse them or incorporate them into the product somehow.
That's awesome. And for those who don't know, maybe like an elevator pitch of what rapid response is in terms of the Horizon 3 product offering.
Sure. So our whole business is autonomous pen testing, which is great. But the rapid response offering is like a fine-tuned special touch on things that are either active in the news cycle that haven't necessarily been incorporated into our product yet. So a big portion of it is triaging customers based on assets we've seen in their environments before. And then once have an idea of how a new vulnerability works and can get a working exploit for it, we'll test those customers before anything is even integrated into our product. And then that way they have kind of a jump start into sort of mitigating these threats before like they can conduct like a full like wide spanning pen test.
Yeah. And I think from kind of the outsider perspective to this, some of the excitement of that role in particular is like the urgency. Like every morning, it seems like you may be, scanning and figuring out what you might be working on that day. Could you walk me through kind of your typical day?
Sure. So a big thing is like I tell candidates when we do interviews and stuff is I'm kind of in a special role where I'm not bound by the same development like sprint cycles that most engineers typically are, because what I'm supposed to be working on is quite literally what is in the news today. So no 2 days are really the same unless there's overflow from the previous day. So it's a big part of, wake up, go through, see what like is in the news, what like new things, if we have any customer requests like, hey, we really need this, and then prioritizing those based on like the largest amount of customer impact. Another thing I like to say is 20% of this job is the actual like research portion, 20% is development, and then 60% is just trying to get access to the products in general. So it's a big portion of being a sysadmin and researcher and developer all in one. And which one of those takes priority is completely dependent on like what's actually happening.
Yeah. And then I know when, we're getting feeds of lots of incoming information and we're trying to decide, more specifically what's quote in the news or what is the potential to kind of be the first fire to fight for the day. My understanding is the team has put together a lot of kind of tech in terms of automation to help, integrate that information and figure out what to work on next. Could you walk me through like, when you are deciding what to work on next, are you checking Slack or what are you clicking on when you get your cup of coffee and sit down on the desk to see what you're going to do?
Yeah. So we have one major Slack channel internally that triages like, or we feed a lot of like external like news sources or feeds and stuff into. And backing all of that are a bunch of automation pipelines that will attempt to do a best effort triage for us. So if a new CVE gets published, it'll run through like, okay, does this meet the criteria of like severity level? So is it remotely exploitable? Does it require credentials? Is it memory corruption? Or sometimes is it a product that we just don't necessarily care about? So there's a ton of noise. So we definitely use a lot of like LLM assistance in terms of just getting a baseline level, but we also monitor blog posts from other notable researchers or security advisories from major vendors, and all of that gets fed in. And the unfortunate truth is it's a lot of information and 99% of it is noise. But what does actually make it to that channel, we can take a look at and then do kind of a gut check of what's more important to our customers, what's likely to be like, even if it's not necessarily something that affects our customer base, is it still important for the industry as a whole? And kind of like working through those lists in a like very subjective priority list.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I find pretty cool that we're able to kind of assess what's important for our customers. We have a certain customer base, and if there's a particular vulnerability that affects a lot of our existing customers, we're able to like proactively bump that in terms of the priority level. For kind of a recent day where you had an emerging vuln, is there something that comes to mind that you might take us through where, once that hit and you decided to work on it, like what did your day look like after that?
So, yeah, let's see. Over the last, we'll just say a week and a half, 2 weeks in general, the team had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rapid responses, which is a pretty high volume. So it was a matter of like 3 of us working through these. And some of them had public proof of concepts. Some of them we had to research ourselves. So it was a matter of everyone coming together and like some people handling, okay, I'll find customers affected while you do the research. And I'll handle creating the marketing material and kind of doing all of that in tandem and doing a little bit of downtime, like kind of seeing where we could help out. One thing I can think of in particular is at the time that we had like the recent light LLM authentication bypass, Noah was great about like getting content and coverage and whatnot into the product while also notifying customers. But since it was a heavier lift to integrate that while he was waiting on, say, a GitLab pipeline to finish running, he was able to help me find customers affected by the Git container registry stuff. And at the same time, Brandon, one of our newest hires, doing his very first rapid response ever, wound up doing, I think, literally 2 in a row within a span of 2 or 3 days, walking him through it.
Trial by fire. There you go.
So it was a lot of just like working together to, okay, someone's going to test all of the affected clients, someone's going to integrate the proof of concept, someone's going to like, do all of that. So if something's not on fire, we can kind of like calm down and work on a little bit more interesting but less, fast paced work. But the general day to day is something's always on fire.
Yeah,
So
6 in 2 weeks is a lot. And then were any of those ones that you didn't have a POC for or proof of concept for that you had to go ahead and develop our own internally?
the Gitty one, we did reverse ourselves, but there was also some information out there already.
Mhm.
We have a couple that were actually discovered by Horizon 3. Naveen released some of the Apache Solar things. And then let me scroll through the list to find them. Yeah, a good amount of them we did reverse. Other people did also publish content, but that was after we had already figured it out and notified customers. So
Yeah. For one that you've reversed in, recent memory or just generically, like walk me through, you're at your computer, this vulnerability exists, how you're actually, figuring out how to develop that proof of concept.
So one thing I have running right now is while we're talking, Claude running through a very, very large patch diff of a checkpoint issue that dropped earlier this week. Authentication bypass for their like firewall gateway. From the start, one, access to the product. Luckily, we can subscribe and get either trial information or just like pay as you go license, which works great. Set up vulnerable and an installed version and now pull down the difference. I don't like throwing like LLMs and stuff at the stuff immediately because you get much better results if you have a more targeted approach. So I'll tend to do a little bit of manual labor to at least clue it in on what to look for. So in this particular one, it's an issue with like a legacy internet key exchange protocol. The reason we're looking at this in terms of impact is it's an authentication bypass on an external gateway that leads to internal corporate networks. So if it were to be compromised, well, now an attacker can access internal resources. So we have figured it out mostly, but since it's kind of a proprietary implementation of the protocol and a lot of like gross compiled stripped binaries, having Claude do the pattern matching on like those proprietary fields has been a major help.
Nice. And then in terms of, the last year or so, what was the trickiest kind of vulnerability you either discovered or kind of reversed or, actually, you know, deployed and packaged the proof of concept for? And what were kind of what made it so challenging, I guess?
That's a good question. I'm trying to come up with one that I remember because I barely remember what I was doing an hour ago.
And I
Let's
think for the
see.
audience's context, Jimi is like our elite of elite hacker. And so asking him what he finds hard is like, I don't know, asking Michael Jordan like last time he found shooting a 3-pointer hard or something like that. So It may be that you just find all of this stuff super easy.
No. Well, no, I find it all very, very hard. I'm just unwilling to give up, which makes it look like I'm good, when in reality, it's just sheer persistence.
But I think that's part of the skill, right? Like that's the
Sure.
hacker mindset, like you can be, persistence is a lot of it as well.
Yeah.
What required an
Actually,
unusual amount of persistence then.
one that I've got two that come to mind now that, like, thinking about it and scrolling through things we've released. A recent one, there was something in one of Cisco's secure firewall management center. I don't know how they name these things other than being very literal. But this was one where we actually got wrong because it was a vulnerability that was released. It was supposedly code execution in some endpoint, doesn't matter. But when we reversed it, we're like, okay, we think we have this, but there were two vulnerabilities patched in the same one. We figured both of them out, and we published it. Well, a few days later, we started getting customer hits, and they're like, what do you mean? Like, we patched. You're saying we're vulnerable to this. I'm like, well, we're clearly getting like outbound commands run on your system. So something's wrong. Turns out that was just a new 0-day. And we didn't actually figure out the issue. So it was a matter of like trying to figure out what we actually did, what was actually vulnerable. And then that eventually led to us like disclosing that extra information to Cisco, notifying customers. And then we did figure out the real issue, which we were then able to fix our own tooling.
So you thought you were developing kind of a POC for a public exploit, and you actually developed a 0-day and then discovered that it was a 0-day
Yep.
when customers thought they had patched for the publicly disclosed issue and we were still getting
And
hits. And that's when you realized the mismatch, that there was another
yep.
issue that they'd have to patch for. And of course, I imagine went through responsible disclosure. This discovery in the customer environments wasn't like broadly on the internet. So we were still able to kind of responsibly work with the vendor to make sure that
Sure.
folks were able to update before this went live.
Yeah.
That's
And the
incredible.
other
And like
example,
another example of how important it is to do this research, and like the fact that, our team is, you mentioned Naveen earlier, and then, this example, we're finding 0-days ourselves. And sometimes the first people to know, in addition to the vendor, is, our customer base as well, because we're able to proactively alert them that they have an issue in this area.
yeah, the other example that comes to mind was an issue in SolarWinds Web Help Desk back in sometime in November last year. A CD had released that said, hey, this is big deal, but it was a patch bypass of a CVE that also was released like a year prior and still had no proof of concept. Nobody really figured it out. And then we beat our heads against the desk for like 3 months and we finally figured it out. And it was a new 0-day again, instead of being the existing issue,
The one,
which
yeah.
that issue we did eventually like lead to understanding how like the older issue worked. And we were one of the first to publish proof of concepts for it. But those were all like sheer persistence and like eventually getting lucky and hitting the right point.
Yeah. It also sounds like, I mean, maybe this is the case wherever you're persistent and decide to look, very, very hard, finding a 0-day or a vulnerability. But it seems to me like if there is already a vulnerability in one area, that the likelihood of there being another vulnerability in that area might go up a little bit, potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah.
It's all hit or miss. It's all written by, or at least it's all approved and published by people. So people make mistakes. Just because there's a bug doesn't mean it's a bad thing. That happens. It's just how people respond to it.
Yeah. And another topic I was thinking of covering in this pod was just, how you got into security originally and what brought you to Horizon 3 and kind of what gets you excited to get up out of bed. Before we get to that section, which, it's to your comfort how much, personal details we go into. But before we get to that, any other thing that comes top of mind when you are talking about kind of a day in the life of a rapid responder at Horizon 3 that you feel like would be interesting for other people? Imagining our listeners are like potential people who are going to work for us, people who like using the product, even folks within engineering that might be cool for them to hear about.
Yeah. The biggest thing I like is that it does change constantly day to day. There's always something new. There's always like, I thrive in chaos. So like if you thrive in chaos, this is very much something that most people would be interested in. Additionally, like the blend between both research and engineering is very appealing to me because I've been in both roles separately and both roles somewhat combined. But what I like about this role at Horizon 3 is specifically is I kind of get the best of both worlds because our whole shtick is like, show me the proof. Like, we're not just going to give you a version and say something's vulnerable. Like, we actually get to do the real work of proving that something is exploitable. That's not to say we don't occasionally do like lower quality checks because sometimes that's the only option. But the appeal is no matter what, when I put something into the product, I get almost immediate feedback of like what I'm doing matters because instead of just throwing research into the ether, whether that's on a conference or a blog post or what have you, I can log into our portal and say, oh, this exploit is running against customers. And then in like scams after that, those vulnerabilities start going away because customers are patching. And that's a very nice
Amazing.
thing to like,
Yeah.
it's very tangible feedback.
Yeah. And you see your exploit hitting as well. You're like, this
Yes.
worked. I'm not wrong
Like,
here. Or you discovered that you accidentally found a new 0 day.
yeah, which it's great to be able to break things and you're supposed to do it.
Yeah.
So like nobody is mad that I broke this thing. In fact, they're happy that I found it.
Yeah. And so maybe let's go back in time a little bit and what got you into this line of work and how did you kind of hone your craft over the years?
So I didn't know security was an option until like my senior year of college. It just never crossed my mind, never hit the map. And then I stumbled into the collegiate cyber defense competition, which is like a collegiate sort of students are blue team, industry professionals hack them, and whichever blue team does the best wins. Getting involved in that was like, well, this is an option. Well, this is what I'm going to do forever. So went, got my master's and like continued on with that program, landed a job in the industry. My home city of Louisville, Kentucky is where DerbyCon was initially founded. So that was like an immediate into like the industry that got me involved in like capture the flag competitions and other events and speaking and like just meeting other professionals doing fun things, which led to like essentially a lifelong love of just like competing in these events and going to conferences and meeting people. And yeah, I kind of purely lucked into it.
Yeah. And I don't know if I'm forgetting the terminology, but is it black hat that has kind of these black badges? I feel like you won a lot of competitions in
I
kind of like the
have.
security national stage and wanted to brag about that a little bit.
Tend not to highlight it too much, but DEF CON hosts many competitions each year that do offer a black badge, which is lifetime free entry. My CTF team and I have won, I want to say 6 or 7 different black badge events at this point, which is very, very nice to be able to brag about and put on a resume.
For sure. And then it's also convenient to not have to pay for a ticket kind of thing.
Yes.
Nothing to reimburse, just bragging rights. In terms of someone, kind of new to the field, is that the same team that you've been competing with? And how did you originally get to know those folks? Maybe that's a little bit in flux, the team, but
It's been the same core membership group for probably 15 or so years now. I didn't join until, let's see, how long ago was that? Like 2015, 2016 was when I started hanging out with them. And it was all standing in line con at DEF CON. And like we just happened to be next to each other and talking. And next thing you know, there was this hack the badge competition that we were doing while we were in line. And then people were running across the conference center screaming at each other. And that was about it.
yeah. And that sounds like kind of a fun, like team camaraderie sort of thing, as does your description of your day to day of the rapid response work in terms of, someone doing this while someone else is doing that, et cetera. I think sometimes there's an impression in computer science in general, and maybe, of external folks of computer security, of this being kind of like a lone wolf sort of thing where someone's in front of their computer and maybe not interacting with other people as much. But you've given several examples of, this being a little bit of a team sport. Not always, but
Oh, yeah.
in part. And I think that can be, really attractive for folks who like that mix. Can you tell me what makes like a good hacker team member as opposed to someone who, maybe is really good at their job, but less good at that kind of team sport element?
Sure. In general, this is a role that both personality types can very much shine in. I definitely fall more into that loner category. Like once I'm like hyper focused on an issue, like I don't come up for air for days at a time sometimes. But at the same time, knowing that I can bounce ideas off of people or chime in and ask for help or like pitch in, like one, it builds the sense of camaraderie, but it also like the people in this role now, the team is growing. We're all doing the same thing. Like it's helpful to know that like I can hyper focus on an issue and nobody's going to be like, what's he even doing? Like, even if it's days and I get nowhere with an issue, like, because those same people have that exact same experience, it's kind of the shared, like, no, we know you're putting the time and the work and all of that in. Like, you don't always find it. So,
Yeah. They have like deep empathy for your situation because they've been in it themselves, kind of thing.
exactly.
Yeah. And then
Like,
sometimes when you do find it, they're celebrating your success because they know what that feels
exactly.
like.
Like, it's 90% failure. So, like, understanding that, like, everyone else doing this job is also failing pretty much all the time is a very good sense of, like, okay, it's fine. Like, it just makes the wins that much better.
And it's okay if you don't have an example of this because I can imagine it is, not every day, but do you have any examples of where you were really stuck on something and someone else was able to kind of help you get unblocked? What do you do when you think that there was maybe a solution? Have you, paired with Naveen or other things like that to I don't know, get to the next level?
It varies. Recently, a lot of the things we've been working on haven't required a ton of like back and forth from like others, but whether it's internal or external or just like kind of reading other people's write ups, like it's always helpful to at least get ideas, even if it's a completely unrelated task. So like seeing that someone else is working on something and like just getting feedback of like what they've been doing is oftentimes enough of a like disconnect that it opens your mind to like other things you could be trying or doing.
Yeah. Like they're not helping you on the exact task, but they're helping like your creativity and like your
Yeah,
approaches and other things like that. And just being able to step away for a second, I
sure.
imagine is
And
also valuable.
even if it's not from a purely technical perspective, a lot of times it's okay, I found this issue. I don't think it's a big deal, but can you think of a context to where it would be?
Mm,
So like if say I've found an issue where like, okay, I can leak this token, but I don't think this token actually does anything. Someone else might have an idea or be able to point you in a direction of like, well, does that give you access to like some other piece of the application or is it inherently sensitive information? So it always helps to be creative and like come up with like impact from something that may or may not initially seem like a big deal or vice versa. Like someone says, I have admin on this. Like, well, okay, does that actually get you anywhere? Can you access anything from it? And sometimes it's
yeah.
no.
Yeah, that's another thing that I like, both love both about our product and like our research approach as well. That sometimes something sounds really terrible, admin access, et cetera. But the question is, what does that get you to? And like ultimately, if it gets you somewhere that has business impact or customer impact, et cetera, then we highlight that, we prioritize that. If that gets you to a bridge to nowhere, it's like, well, what is this? It sounds bad, but it's not actually, and vice versa. We can find things that sound, maybe if you describe them sound like they'd be less of a big deal, but when you put them in the chain of the tech or when you go ahead and see where that gets you next and ask those questions, like it gets you to some pretty nasty places. And so really important
Yeah.
that our customers fix it right away.
Yeah. Like it kind of goes back to like there's a lot of noise and most of it doesn't matter. Like it's kind of a running joke in the like researcher side of the industry of like, hey, if you have admin access, you can run commands as an admin. Like, yeah, of course. Like just because you're doing it and by abusing a bug doesn't necessarily make it a vulnerability. So it's trying to sift through all of that. Things that can seemingly sound critical maybe aren't.
Yeah. And, as you mentioned, the team's expanding. If you could, define your kind of ideal like new teammate, what is it that you're looking for in a new teammate to help fight these security fires with you?
People that want to be doing it.
Yeah.
Like
Enthusiasm.
if you are enjoying it and are going to like find it fun and entertaining, I would rather work with you any day than someone who is a supposed rock star. Like especially with all the new tools and assistants, as long as you're someone that will, commit to like doing like the actual job in addition to enjoying all of the ad hoc research elements of it, that's my personal preference. I don't care if you're fresh out of college or 30 years experience. Like if you're still finding it fun and like getting after it, that's what I want to see.
Yeah. And it sounds like from your description that like that persistence or grit or like just being able to like
Yes.
keep on at it, that hacker mindset seems like very valuable in your personal success. how do you figure out if someone has that in a short conversation? What are some of your kind of tips?
If you get them talking about something they had fun doing, it's very different than them describing, say, a challenge. So one thing I always like to ask people, like in an interview, like I'll give the typical interview question of like, can you describe a situation when blah, 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 and like technical challenge that you had to solve? Then I'll try to change gears and ask them, okay, what's the last thing that you enjoyed working on? What did you enjoy about it? And then try to get them talking, like, do they do things on the side and like technical challenges involved? And a lot of times, even if someone is really good at talking to people and like bullshitting and getting their way through it, they will still change tune. Like a new shine will come up. And they're like, oh, this is what I really want to talk about. And the most introverted, nervous person will still like start opening up a little bit more if they're like, okay, now I'm like, this is clearly I want to enjoy this. It's not. So always just that
Someone's
little
not
spark
trying
of
to.
like even if it was your first bug bounty and a very low priority bug or something like that, like if you're excited about it, that's what I want to see.
Yeah, a big signal. And it sounds like in this environment as well, like that's what keeps you energized day after day without like getting burnout, because it doesn't sound like the world's easiest job to like every morning be like, okay, what do I have to work on today? And then work on it with such urgency and uncertainty, whether you'll actually in some cases be able to like find the exploit or the issue.
Yeah, going into a task when you know that you're probably going to fail takes a special like mindset and understanding of like your performance is not being judged based on that. Like that's just part of the job.
Yep. And how has the role you mentioned, using Claude after, some careful, research ahead of time to figure out where best to point it to certain locations. But how has your job or even your enjoyment of the job changed in the last, I'm going to go beyond just your tenure here at Horizon 3, but while like the advent of a lot of these great agentic AI tools, Claude Code, other LLM based assistants, are you having more fun at work, or is this just extra? Like, how has your work changed with these tools?
Pluses and minuses. In general, my enjoyment hasn't changed at all. I still enjoy it as much as I always have, but it's changed kind of how I workflow. Now I have like an intern that will give me results in 20 minutes. Like I treat all LLMs and like agentic things as if like it were a junior developer or an intern giving me something. Like it's not going to be perfect. It's usually going to be wrong, but I can eventually get it to where I want it. But it takes some of the fun out because it's really good at pattern recognition. It's really good at like deobfuscating common routines, which part of that is puzzle solving. I like puzzles. I want to solve the puzzle, but
You're like,
now I
fun
have something that
puzzle.
will typically do it for me. It's like getting ready to do a Sudoku, but it's already filled in. Like not really fun to just like open it, be like, okay, I'm done, and then close it. But at the same time, a lot of the boring tasks are also done very quickly for me. Like I don't
Mhm.
need to spend a whole lot of time going through a disassembly just to find like, okay, these are all the functions that change in a meaningful way. Like now I can spit out and I can do my analysis that way. So I would say it's changed in terms of enjoyment rather than like any sort of net increase or decrease.
Yeah, yeah. It like decreased your, the kind of more plumbing or boring work, but at the same time, it also decreased some of the fun puzzles that you got to solve, and those
Exactly.
kind of like cancel out for you a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is there anything you do in terms of your kind of agentic engineering workflow that you feel like not everyone does that might be interesting to talk through? Like, do you have any skills that you have? I'm not asking for exact details, but just, broadly, whether there's anything that you do that you've customized that you feel like is pretty cool.
Two answers. The first one that most people definitely don't do is turn it off occasionally. Like the brain rot is the brain rot is real. Like occasionally if you're in this industry, like you're still going to run into challenges that AI can't necessarily handle because it goes well beyond the complex like context window, or it just doesn't see it because it's so like weird or nuanced that it's just not a pattern that it's seen before. So kind of keeping your chops like intact is very important. So occasionally it's nice to work through problems without like assistance every now and then. I think I've luckily been in like prime era for like these tools to arrive because the fundamentals are there. I got to learn them. I had to learn the hard way. I didn't have any assistance for this, which means now that I have hundreds of interns that can do my bidding in 20 minutes, like I still have all of that experience and I can sift through what they give me like immediately without having to like relearn all of these fundamentals on the fly to know if what they gave me is correct or not. I'm not sure if that
Yeah.
description makes sense, but
It makes so much sense. I have a blog post, somewhere about like being the last generation of programmers a little bit because I had the
yeah,
chance to on the job solve all those Sudokus that are now already filled out and like
yes,
C, C++, Fortran, like reading a little assembly, like working in a variety of different languages. And I don't think myself transplanted into this current era would ever have had the chance to do that. If I had to do some C development, I might, farm it out to Claude and I wouldn't like get the chance to like sit there for, 5 weeks bashing my head against the syntax and pointers and, all this sort of stuff.
yes,
Certainly if it was more advanced, eventually I might get that chance, but I had the opportunity to like go through that throughout my career. So now with the advent of the agentic AI, if I do farm that out to my intern, I can like evaluate it and kind of see it a little bit. But I think it would be very hard for me starting out today to either get the motivation or even the opportunity because a lot of that was on the job for me. And it's like on the job,
exactly.
no one's going to encourage you recreationally to waste 5 weeks if Claude could do it in, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 minutes kind of thing. Whereas that
Exactly.
5 weeks was like an incredible learning opportunity for me when I was coming up. So I feel kind of like privileged to be like right here where I can kind of see like both the future and the past. And I think it's going to be extra hard for folks coming up. But perhaps there'll be like fun puzzles and challenges. Like I know, historically there's like little competitions where folks, specifically maybe restrict themselves to not using AI and that sort of thing. And hopefully there'll be opportunities where people can, solve these Sudokus, even if they're not allowed or encouraged to do so frequently on the job because, it's so fun programming, I think. So
Yeah. So like even like the boring stuff of just like updating fields in some JSON file, like occasionally turn it off, do it yourself, understand
yeah.
like what it actually means, even if it's just grunt work.
Yeah. So that's tip one. And I think we're popping the stack here, but if you could go to tip two too for your agentic engineering.
Not necessarily a tip, but just building out skills to do like all the patch diffing and installing things for you. Many people have their own variations. I know there are at least 3 or 4 people internally that are doing the exact same thing, but it's very satisfying to like set up a few skills that can use like all of your reversing tools and just like spit out something that's usually not 100% there, but it's most of the way there. So like giving it a patched version of a piece of software, a vulnerable version, access to, like a couple of virtual machines and saying go and watching it install everything on the fly and actually do the work is very fun.
You're like, ha. It's nice to be evil for good, if that makes any sense. Where it's like and then I think in this era of, the models, potentially coming up with more exploits. And we're kind of in this transition period where, you know, there's lumpy access to that information. I think eventually those same models will be able to potentially secure the code before it even goes out there. But right now we're kind of in, a lumpy bit of history where potentially there'll be, I think, reading about Mythos and other things like that, this like wave, and we're already seeing that a little bit of, vulnerabilities that a new class of model is able to find, and we have to kind of like catch up a little bit. I think, being able to work agentically as well and kind of fight fire with fire is important. What is your take on kind of Mythos and this general concept of, the attacker's work is getting easier at the same time the defender's work is getting easier, and where are we going to find ourselves in this cat and mouse game?
I think sure these models might be incrementally better. I don't think there is worth the hype as many others just because we have yet to actually see it. A big thing I think a lot of people are forgetting with Mythos is all of these companies were given access to specifically test their own things. Do we know that they weren't necessarily doing that before? Sure, they're finding all of these, but they now had an incentive to go looking, whereas before they had to pay for their own access and go like do it. So maybe it was this incentive that caused them to go looking in the model. While probably and like measurably better, is it so much better than the existing models, or was it the incentive of them using it that kind of highlighted all of these issues?
Yeah,
But kind
it's
of
kind of like you've there's a bunch of stuff in your house or something, and someone comes over and says, I can find all your lost things for free. And then you find a lot of lost things, but like, were you looking for those things before or not?
Exactly.
Like, if you were constantly looking for them and then they found a few, then that would be a better signal of like the number of
Yeah,
the differential there. Yeah, I could certainly see that plausibly being, part of the explanation. I think whether it's Mythos or something else, it's clear they're incrementally getting better, and that one day there might be a step change. If it's not Mythos, it might be another. Because we certainly saw a step change
sure.
in capability with, say the GPTs, where all of a sudden, or even Claude Code, where it went from okay, this is kind of maybe a high school student to more of that like college level intern at a certain point.
Sure. Uh, in terms of like, how does it change like my day to day? It just means the volume of work is changing, is really all it is. Like with all of these things pumping out so much code, it's not all getting reviewed correctly. There's always going to be issues. But at the same time, there's so many of these issues fixed that it's still humans doing a lot of the updating. So now there are more issues that they're going to be affected by that are unpatched. So it's the cat and mouse game continues as it ever has and as it always will.
Yeah. And it seems like, some of the issues or the ability for us both internally to prioritize within our, team's rapid response, what's important today to work on, and to be able to do that on behalf of our customers by showing, like what's exploitable, et cetera. If you have a deluge of issues, being able to figure out the most important ones to work on first, like seems more important than ever to me.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll close things out briefly by like we could talk a little bit about what you do to kind of unwind or outside of, your hacking abilities. Like could I ask you a little bit? I know you have a rock climbing hobby. Could I ask you about that a little?
I do. Yeah. So if I'm not doing this stuff, I'm probably completely disconnected just because. So very avid rock climber, primarily bouldering, but I live close enough to Red River Gorge that it'd be kind of a waste if I weren't sport climbing there. Yeah, I'll be spending a little over 2 weeks in South Africa for a bouldering trip this summer. So that'll be very
Oh, that's
fun.
cool. Yeah. What is the type of rock that they have there?
It is all sandstone, but not brittle, which is weird to say. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't
because I
like rub
usually would
off
think
like
of,
traditional sand or anything, but
yeah, it's like
yeah,
hard sandstone, I guess. That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And I feel like pattern matching here, a lot of computer programmers or computer security people have rock climbing as a hobby, like compared to the general population. Can you speculate why or like identify like what's the commonality in terms of folks who kind of enjoy this, security or computer science type of work and rock climbing?
it's a little off the beaten path, so it's not as intimidating to get into, I feel, as like trying to join like a pickup basketball league or get into like tennis or something. But at the same time, it's solving puzzles just in a physical manner. Like if someone doesn't want to sit on a bike for 20, 30 minutes, but they're willing to like go stand at a gym and like try to figure out how to do something and engage their brain a little bit more, like it's definitely attractive.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on. This is actually our first podcast episode. So it's been a delight to catch up and to kind of hear about, the day-to-day life of an attacker at H3, Horizon 3, and as well kind of talk through some of the ways your job has evolved and changed over time and how you're bringing in agentic engineering in kind of the smart way. And I especially like the advice to, turn it off. Sometimes I wonder if like there's an hour every day where we all do that, where it's like, okay, this is my hour where I'm going to practice and keep those connections sharp as well.
See what they can't see, know what they don't know. Every hidden path, every open door. This is Recon at Horizon 3.